Now, let's get started. I'm pleased to welcome you all to this joint ECON LIBE public hearing on the new anti-money laundering package, including by tackling emerging risks, such as those posed by crypto assets.
Crypto assets as well, and perhaps we could come back to the use of crypto assets in a war scenario. And here too, we need to be able to review the European situation with regard to the other authorities. Since we don't have an AMLA as yet, we're working on the basis of a transatlantic G7 with the Americans and the European companies or authorities. Of course, we have the question of crypto assets, non-monetary tools. It's important that this matter be tackled in a very thorough fashion. Well, there you have it, Chair. Thank you very much.
Now, digital assets used to sit in the realm of an innovative sector. It's an exciting sector, but it also has some risks. And so we're working currently quite actively in this sector to make sure that this sector has the ability and are able to guide and interact with policymakers to ensure that this sector is not being used, A, for sanctions evasion, B, that it's not being used for criminals to circumvent some of the KYC, know your customer, and other controls that the traditional banking sector are obligated to conduct. And also that we can encourage these discussions in a meaningful way to foster innovation in a way that makes sure that these organizations in this sector respond responsibly and are able to conduct their business in a prudent way.
The second question is on crypto assets as a possibility for circumventing also the sanctions now. There I really would like to hear if you think that the issue of cryptocurrencies are addressed well enough in the AML package, or if we should do further to address this.
Then there was a question of crypto assets or cryptocurrencies. Yes, indeed. This is an issue which, technically speaking, is quite recent. It's something which we have seen. We've observed this in a number of dossiers which we've passed on to the French authorities. There was also a question of terrorism in the Syrian and Iraqi area. We've seen that there was use of these crypto assets from Europe for this area. And then something which is recurrent. In fact, last week, 3 times, on 3 occasions, I passed on to the public prosecutor the use of crypto assets for pedopornography. And here there's a question of the threshold, and this is where I conclude, and this is a matter for the competence of your Parliament, the establishment of thresholds. As soon as the threshold is exceeded, it should be possible to identify the user of the funds. This is essential because these criminals just use a few euros. We're talking about 7, 9, 10 euros on the dark web. This is what they do, and this is all that's paid to see terrible things happening in Southeast Asia, and that's where you could make progress if everybody who pays any type of money is identified. Then we should be able to do something. The amounts paid are very low indeed, and that's where you could really help us out. Thank you.
On cryptos, this requires a longer conversation. Yes, there are risks in the system. I think the key for us as we work with that sector is really to focus on the exchanges that need a robust KYC system. We can talk about where the risks are, but that would probably require a longer discussion. But happy to discuss that offline.
One more thing about the crypto topic. Indeed, it is very important to have zero threshold. So we cannot allow anonymous crypto transfers. That should be the most important rule. On a medium term, it might be interesting to see whether AMLA could take over direct supervision for certain types of crypto asset service providers. There could be options, definitely not all of them. And this methodology should be developed, and let's say maybe in 3 or 5 years anyway, the market will be very different, so it can be changed. Avoiding sanctions, it is a problem in crypto. We know, for example, North Korea tried to do it, but it is not certainly the biggest problem. I just want to recall that OCCRP presented a Russian asset tracking system, which bases its information on leaked data, and they collected over 17 billion euros of Russian assets in all Western countries, only from leaked data. So we cannot even imagine what's really behind in the pockets of those people. Thank you very much.
There are cryptocurrency transactions which are being looked at by this legislation. Now, I don't doubt that these financial products have major potential benefits and they're innovative, but they're used in organised crime as well. In addition, the lower value of 1,000 euros for the reporting of cryptocurrency transactions should be raised. Is this appropriate, particularly given the future competitiveness of Europe? Thank you.
Talk about unhosted wallets and crypto asset service providers that don't respect regulation. That's a question I'd put to all the panellists. What should we do? Should we banning things? And in general terms, where should there be alarms? There seem to be too many crypto rackets. Perhaps you could alert us to them.
As one of the co-rapporteurs for the transfer of funds regulation, I would like to share a few words on the file. The travel rule for traditional wire transfers has been around for many years now. We are now extending this to transfers in crypto assets. There are some people who welcome this and others who are very opposed and even emotional. To the second group, I would like to say that I'm convinced that proper regulation of crypto transfers will help, not harm the growth and innovation in this sector. It will increase trust and help our authorities to push back against the abuses, which are also real. Together with our colleagues, we are discussing proposals to partly include transfers involving unhosted wallets. We are working on guarantees for personal data protection. We have also proposed to remove the threshold for occasional transactions to avoid smurfing, and we have linked our TFR file from the new AML package and instead linked it to the current legislation. I have a question for Dr. Player. The FATF has done a lot of work recently on virtual assets. In our discussions on applying the travel rule, we are struggling with 2 points. The first one is the sunrise issue. The crypto world is global, but our laws are limited by the borders of our jurisdictions. What can you share about discussions at global level regarding the travel rule for crypto? And second and last point is about the unhosted wallets. There are ideological as well as practical differences among the people involved in this issue. In your professional view, as this is almost philosophical, what are unhosted wallets in your professional view, and how can and should they be brought into the scope of the travel rule? Because the way you define them will also define how you regulate them. Thank you very much, Chair. I finished.
Okay. Now, please, time to respond, and that'll be the final track of this joint hearing. It'll be Mr. Player. First, 2 minutes for your responses.
To be honest, it's impossible to answer all these questions in 2 minutes. So let me be very, very quick. To the last speaker, I can only underline that our experience is exactly what she described, that the regulation of virtual assets is not stifling innovation, but in the end really creates legal certainty and gives a boom to the industry. The very specific questions on unhosted wallets, I think we are observing that. Currently, the scale of use of unhosted wallets is not to that extent that we are worried currently, but I think we closely have to observe it, and there might come the moment when we have to indeed take them into the scope of the regulation.
The question of the thresholds for crypto assets. Obviously, we're fairly concerned in France in TRACFIN that we have to know what we are doing and those we are instructing, and we actually do feel that you do need to track things from the first euro of a transaction. And with Ukraine, we have calls for vigilance that we have addressed to French banking institutes, taking into account crypto assets too. for groups of European nationals, French people, for example, who are in contact with the aggressor forces in Ukraine. These are solidarity mechanisms instituted against a few European nationals, French nationals, who are acting there. And this is something that's absolutely vital. We have seen this since the start of the war. We usually do this when it comes to pedophilia, for example. This is something new, though.
Excuse me, in terms of crypto firms and the digital asset community, this is a complicated topic. I think fundamentally, in principle, I think this is all about a level playing field, that crypto firms and digital asset firms should play in the same field that the financial services firms do in terms of all the regulatory requirements and due diligence requirements that affords. There's also a question of level of anonymity. Some crypto firms are specifically designed to hide behind who sends payment and who receives payment. And there's a question there whether that's the proper thing to do. There's no question that the digital asset space is an exciting space, but it's also been used for fraud. So this is not just a financial crime issue, it's also an issue around consumer protection at the end of the day, where we've seen investors and consumers being defrauded in this